We're back. Happy Father's Day, everybody, and welcome to another live episode of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. Let's get into it. Hey, everybody, how are we doing? Happy Sunday, happy Father's Day, and welcome back to another live edition of the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast. I am back in the country after a couple of days out in Corfu, celebrating a very dear friend's wedding, getting a bit of sun. As you can probably tell by my face, I probably should have taken my sunglasses off, and I probably got a little bit complacent with regards to the sun when I was sitting on the beach yesterday. But hey, it is what it is. I'm back and I'm feeling good, and I'm glad to have taken a bit of a break from all the transfer nonsense, if you like, because a lot of it is nonsense. A lot of it has got people confused, frustrated, wound up. And the truth is that we're probably not at the stage where we should be angry just yet. In fact, we're definitely not at that stage yet. Very, very early days in the window. But I understand that when you're looking around and you're seeing other clubs do business and execute on deals that they've clearly had in the pipeline for quite some time, you're looking at Arsenal and you're going, well, come on. Like, this was meant to be a mega summer. And, you know, if you told us or it was suggested that the reason we didn't recruit in January was because we were very clear on what we wanted to do in the summer, and doing anything in January might have kind of scuppered those plans in any way, shape, or form, then people would have probably been expecting to head into this summer and be really kind of on it and ready to go and ready to execute on some of these deals. It hasn't been the case just yet, but it doesn't mean there isn't work going on in the background. And that's the key point here. There is a lot of work going on in the background. There are a lot of talks. There are a lot of conversations ongoing. We just haven't got anything over the line yet, as far as we understand it and as far as we're aware. Looks like Martin Zubimendi's coming in. I think we can all kind of relax on that one now and just put our feet up around that one and just chill out and wait and see when exactly that's going to be announced. Look, we know that Real Sociedad have a preference for that deal to be ratified in July, so that's the most likely outcome. But look, I got to be honest, over the last couple of days, I did my absolute best to switch off from it all. I didn't want to talk about transfers. I didn't want to be thinking about transfers. And I certainly didn't want to be winding myself up about what hasn't happened yet, essentially, right? So I did cut off as much as I possibly could. But yesterday, when I was on my way back, I left my hotel. I got in the cab on my way to Corfu Airport. The minute I got out of the taxi, I got a text. And the text was from the airline with whom I was traveling, who said, "We apologize, but your flight has been delayed." Now, it was delayed by just under 2 hours. So I've just got to the airport and I've thought to myself, how's your luck? If I got this text 15, 20 minutes ago, I would have still been chilling at the hotel, having a nice cold drink, enjoying my last bit of time on the Greek island. Instead, I traveled to the airport and I thought, right, what the hell am I going to do now? So I sat down, got myself a coffee, and I started scrolling. Something that I'd avoided doing over the days prior to that. And actually, it was pretty refreshing. But then, of course, there was a tweet from Fabrizio Romano about Viktor Gyökeres. And we're going to talk about that because that is our main story today. We're going to talk about Viktor Gyökeres seemingly prioritizing a move to Arsenal. What does that mean in terms of our chances of getting him? What does it mean in terms of our interest in Benjamin Sesko? There's a lot to unpack here. We're going to do that throughout the duration of this pod. Do not fear. But there are a couple of other stories that I want to touch on, that I want to cover off as well. So we're going to do those too. I think it's important that we do that because, you know, the Gyökeres thing, right? And we'll come on to talk about it in a lot more detail in a bit, as I say. But it was like, everyone was like, oh my God, Viktor Gyökeres wants Arsenal. Well, why wouldn't you want Arsenal over Manchester United currently, who are the other club that are said to be seriously interested in the player? Like, why would you not pick Arsenal over them at this stage? Everything about us is better. We're in a far better state. We're in a far more competitive position. There's lots and lots to be positive about around Arsenal, despite the kind of wave of negativity that came when it became apparent we weren't going to win anything last season. there's still a lot, if you kind of zoom out and look at the bigger picture, that makes Arsenal a far more attractive proposition than the likes of, for example, Manchester United. So this didn't come as a surprise to me. The reaction to it did. But when I thought it became interesting was when I started to go down the various rabbit holes of thoughts, and go down different lanes of conversation around this. So we'll get into all of that. Okay, let's dive in though to our first story, which doesn't involve Viktor Gyökeres. It involves a player actually that we've been linked with in the past. Is there a possibility that Arsenal revitalize their interest in this particular player? We'll get into that right after this. So, according to reports coming out of the Netherlands, Arsenal are interested once again in PSV Eindhoven winger Johan Bakayoko. Now, I remember him being really strongly linked with a move to the Premier League, with a move to Brentford. Brentford couldn't get that deal done. They were willing to pay in excess of £40 million at the time, from what I remember. But Bakayoko took the decision, I think, in the end to stay with PSV Eindhoven, play Champions League football for one more year, and see how it went. Now, Bakayoko is said to be available now for just £17 million. And that is largely due to the fact that he's got 1 year left on his contract. So this is what people would class as, I'd imagine, a market opportunity. The problem is that does Bakayoko move the needle for us? I'm not sure that he does. I wasn't totally convinced by him when we were initially linked. I certainly wasn't massively impressed by him when we played against them. Showed flashes, can beat a man, can check inside, can drop the shoulder nicely. But generally, do I think his all-round game is strong enough? And do I think he's the one that Arsenal should be looking to recruit in those wide positions? No, I don't. But at £17 million, there will be a lot of people out there that will tell you this is worth a punt and this is worth a go. He's seen as a potential backup to Bukayo Saka, is what this piece says. Now, that's the interesting bit for me, because we're talking about the left-hand side a lot this summer, aren't we? There seems to be a real focus there. I think there's a general consensus that Gabriel Martinelli's not quite at that top level, that neither is Leandro Trossard. And if we could get the winger in through the door that would just raise the bar on that left-hand side, we'd have a much more complete attack, particularly with the addition of a centre forward as well, which we think is coming. Who it's going to be, we're not sure yet, but we think that's coming. So for me, this is interesting because this is very specific in this report that actually if Bakayoko was to come in, it would be as a backup to Bukayo Saka. I know we need one. I know we need someone that can come in off that right-hand side with a left foot, similarly to the way that Bukayo Saka does, and can impact football matches. But I kind of see that as being Ethan Nwaneri at this stage. Like, I know people want to, in the future, see him move into a more central role, but he's not displacing Odegaard from the team. I don't think he's going to play as a left eight. I don't think that Ethan Nwaneri physically is necessarily built to play the Arteta 8 role. Now, it's not to say he wouldn't play it somewhere else or that he wouldn't get into the team somewhere else. But when I look at what Arteta goes for in that part of the pitch, there seems to be a certain level of physicality required. And people will push back. People will push back on me and they'll say, yeah, but Martin Odegaard isn't that. And I'd argue, no, you know what? Martin Odegaard, he puts in so much work. Physically, he is very, very good and is at a very, very high level. Might not be the traditional definition of a physical player in that he isn't particularly bulky or all of that, but physically he gives you a lot. Nwaneri coming in off that right-hand side, I think at times can be devastating. And I think at times that's when you get the very, very best out of Ethan Nwaneri, because if he plays in a central area, you can cut off the supply to him quite easily, like people have been doing to Martin Odegaard. Whereas when you go out on that right-hand side, when you drag and pull out really, really wide, you can receive the ball on the touchline, and then you've got it. Okay, the path inside could be crowded and blocked at times, and the opposition are likely to make that difficult for you to make those advances. But Ethan Nwaneri's got the ability, once he's got the ball, to make things happen. So for me, you got to get these players on the ball. And if it means putting him out on the right-hand side, if that means he's going to get the ball more and receive it to feet more, where he can then go on to hopefully do damage, I'm okay with that. You know, look, I don't think Ethan Nwaneri is going to start every game. next season. I don't think he's going to start ahead of Martin Odegaard. So him playing out on the right-hand side for me at times is absolutely fine. I know that Arsenal's preference is to go out and get a winger this summer that can play on both sides. And that is the best case scenario. But for me, Bakayoko can't play on the left. So this feels like a bit of a waste of time. I think that the upgrade required is on that left-hand side. And actually, if we did that and we kept Martinelli and Trossard, which looks like is likely, one of those guys could go out on the right-hand side in an emergency, Martinelli in particular, and I don't think I'd have too much of a problem with that. So the Bakayoko thing, long story short, gone around the houses, not for me, not interested. Even at 17 million pounds, he doesn't really appeal to me. I've got to be brutally honest about this one. According to reports, Arsenal have also made initial contact and are monitoring Alexandro Ribero from Lille, Brazilian defender. Apparently, we had scouts watching him in Brazil's match against Paraguay. He wasn't the only player that we were watching. It doesn't go on to tell you much about who those others might be, but Arsenal are said to be interested in this young man. So, what do I think about him? Honestly, I don't know a great deal. 25 years old, born in Rio in Brazil, currently plays for Lille. Just looking at some of his statistics, he looks like he's very strong in the passing department, which would help Arsenal given the way they like to play out from the back and would make him a relatively good fit. Doesn't rank particularly highly, though, when it comes to tackles, interceptions, blocks. Is it because he's so good that he doesn't need to get himself involved in those situations? People often say that about the very, very top defenders. If you look at FB Ref, where they do the stats breakdowns, they then bring you like a player comparison, which it doesn't tell you that X player is as good as Y player or that they're on the same level. But what it does is it looks at the metrics and it tries to pinpoint players who stylistically are quite similar. And that gives you an indication of the profile of player that you're looking at. Now, don't get carried away with this, but one of the names on that list is Virgil van Dijk. Mickey van der Ven is on that list of players whom have a very similar stat set to Alexandro Ribero. There are others like Amir Romani at Napoli, good defender. Tyrone Mings is mentioned. Tosin Adarabioyo, Van Hecker from Brighton, and Tapsoba from Bayer Leverkusen are among those mentioned as well. Look, again, not saying he's as good as any of those players. Some of those players are not even at the level that we'd want, really. But Arsenal being interested in a centre-back shouldn't surprise people. We talked about it just before I went away. Dean Howson was obviously someone that, we were looking at. We couldn't get that deal done. He went off to Real Madrid, etc., etc. But he was a player we were interested in, which indicated that there was an appetite to bring in a centre-back. We've heard some reports with regards to some other players as well. Mark Gay's been linked again. And so when you read reports like this, it's not surprising to see that we are, at least open-minded to the idea of bringing a central defender in. So let's see what's going to happen with that. Again, I wouldn't get too carried away with these. These are just reports that I was reading while I was sitting in the airport scrolling last night. But the bulk of today's podcast is going to be with regards to Viktor Gyökeres. That's what everybody wants to talk about. That's what we're going to get into. Let's do that very story right after this really, really short pause.
You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner. Like and subscribe.
That's right. You're listening to the Chronicles of a Gooner podcast with me, Harry Symeou. Like and subscribe, all of the above. If you haven't left us a review and you're listening on audio, please do that. If you want to become a patron, you can do so via the link in the description. We've got another one of our scouting videos dropping a little bit later on today. I know that the first one went down really well, got a lot of positive messages about that. So we're bringing you another one of those. It'll be released probably early this evening. I'll be recording it as soon as we finish up here. So yeah, lots of content coming your way. We're back now. We're in full flow. And lots and lots to cover as always. Right. Should we talk then about this Viktor Gyökeres stuff? What does it all mean? What does it all mean? I hear you ask. Does Viktor Gyökeres want to come to Arsenal above anybody else? Well, it appears that way, doesn't it? And I remember sort of reading this yesterday and sort of looking at some of the comments and then seeing some of the posts around it and then going on to read what certain people had written, sort of in terms of articles and threads, and then looking at maybe some of the video content that was coming out in the kind of Arsenal space. And there just seemed to be a real buzz and a real excitement about this. I don't want to be the guy that pours cold water on stuff, right? But we've gone from Cesco's the priority to no, Berta's come in and decided that actually he wants Gyökeres. And everybody thought we were going for Viktor Gyökeres. And then there were some reports that came out from the likes of Florian Plettenberg and Fabrizio Romano that pushed everybody back into the direction of believing that actually Benjamin Sesko was the one and Viktor Gyökeres was nothing but a smokescreen. And maybe that interest wasn't as serious as we were led to believe initially. And then you get this report yesterday, and people seem to have again swung from one way to the other. The pendulum's completely swung from one way to the other. Let me tell you this. Nothing has changed based on what we read yesterday. Based on those reports, my opinion on this has not changed whatsoever. From the very beginning, I said, and I felt that Viktor Gyökeres coming in was more of a sure thing for the here and now. I thought that his ability to score goals would probably translate better to the Premier League than maybe Benjamin Sesko's. But we did our scouting video on Benjamin Sesko. You can check out on Patreon, by the way. And, we've talked about him at length. And I've come to the conclusion that whichever one of these players, if indeed we end up with any of them, we bring in, I'll be content with that. I'll be okay with that. I'll be happy with that. I think they both represent really, really good options. It doesn't need to be Team Gyökeres or Team Sesko. You can look at both players. You can see the strengths and the weaknesses in both, the pros, the cons, the positives, the flaws, whatever. I think both of them represent really, really good options. But let's break down, right, what Fabrizio Romano actually said yesterday and what he actually posted and what difference this actually makes. Because people appear to have taken this like, well, we're going to go and sign Viktor Gyökeres now, it's done. And we might. But this report yesterday didn't really give us too much, did it? Viktor Gyökeres' priority is to join Arsenal this summer, despite calls from Manchester United in the recent weeks. And people have got very, very excited about that. Viktor Gyökeres' priority might well be to join Arsenal. Why wouldn't it be over the likes of Manchester United? Ask yourself that question. And then the next question you should ask yourself is, okay, then, so how significant an update is this? We're in this weird time, right, where transfer news, that the appetite for it is just ridiculous. I've never seen anything like it. It's crazy, man. Like, I don't get why people get so excited and why people jump on bandwagons so quickly. I like the player. I would love to see him come in. Equally, I like Benjamin Sesko. I'd like to see him come in as well. But just think about that question for a minute. Or that statement. Viktor Gyökeres' priority is to join Arsenal this summer, despite calls from Manchester United. Who in their right minds today would pick Manchester United over Arsenal? So thank you, Captain Obvious. What Fabrizio Romano does go on to say, which gives us a little bit more insight into maybe what's going on. He says Gyökeres has always been an option for Arsenal amid Cesco talks with no deal sealed so far. Arsenal keep assessing the situation. He then goes on to say, United remain keen but believe deal now unlikely. This feels like a bigger deal for the Manchester United supporters that thought that they were going to get Viktor Gyökeres in through the door, or that they stood a very good chance of doing that. Brian Mbeumo is also being courted by Tottenham right now, which means that Man United could end up losing out on a couple of their preferred targets because people can recognize from a distance and from quite far right now what an utter mess they are as a football club. So, okay, yes, he's an option. I think we always thought he was an option. Would he prefer Arsenal over Manchester United? Yes, I think that's obvious. And although there's a Cesco interest too, and that those talks have been ongoing, there's been no breakthrough, there's been no deal reached. So Arsenal are right to keep their options open at this stage, but this is not really a huge major update. And I think it's important that we break these things down so as not to get carried away. And the reason I say that, right, is because when we first talked about Gyökeres versus Cesco, it created this division within the fan base, and certainly among the people that I know. There was a group of people that were saying, no, it's got to be Sesko. And there was another group that said, no, it's got to be Gyökeres. And it's like the Sesko group have been jumping up and down and celebrating because it looked like we were heading there. And then this comes out yesterday. And now the Gyökeres people are like, yes, this could happen. Let's get Viktor Gyökeres in. Listen, they're both good options. Arsenal are right, in my opinion, to keep both options open. Arsenal are right, in my opinion, to be holding talks with both camps because, first of all, you don't want to be left in the lurch if your preferred target becomes unavailable for whatever reason, maybe chooses to go elsewhere, maybe the selling club won't budge on the price, which essentially prices you out of the move. There's a lot of variables in the transfer market and there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So you've got to keep your options open. You've got to be able to pivot at the right points and at the right times. And I think Arsenal, in doing this, are giving themselves that bit of cushion and that bit of safety, if you like. But at the same time, I think that the smartest thing about all of this is that they are creating an environment in which, in my opinion, they stand to now get the best possible deal on whichever one it is they sign. RB Leipzig dragging their heels over Benjamin Sesko, not budging on the price. Okay, we'll go after Viktor Gyökeres. All of a sudden, Benjamin Sesko is pushing and going, hold on a minute, lads. All of a sudden, Benjamin Sesko's sitting there and going, come on, lads, I'd quite like to make this move. And you're potentially going to scupper this for me. Surely there's something you can do in terms of the price. And so he starts pushing from his side. Vice versa. You've got Viktor Gyökeres and his people maybe applying some pressure on Sporting and going, come on, drop my price, because I want to join Arsenal. And they're not making any progress with Benjamin Sesko right now in terms of that deal. It's kind of now or never for me. What you've done is just created complete and utter chaos and almost a desperation on both parts of this and on both sides of this from the players' camps to seal those moves. Viktor Gyökeres especially probably thinks if I don't get this big move this summer, I might not get it. He's at an age where he's not old by any means, but he's at an age where, he probably feels like he's got one major move left in him. And the older he gets, the less likely it is that one of the big European clubs come in and meet Sporting's demands. Okay, you could argue that in line with that, Sporting's demands might decrease over time and all the rest of it. But I just look at this and I think you progressing the deal with both of these players or trying to make as much progress as you can with both of these players, I think it just creates a really healthy negotiating environment. And that's something that Arsenal maybe wouldn't have done pre-Andrea Berto. We've heard so much about his approach, haven't we? That he goes out there, that he opens talks, that he gets into conversations, and that he puts things in place for Arsenal to then be able to kind of take their pick. And I like it to a point. I did say earlier on in the summer that I was a little bit worried that maybe, as a player, hearing that, he wants you or Arsenal want you, but then knowing that they're in talks with many others, it might take away that kind of special feeling. It might take away that feeling of belonging and that buzz that comes with really being chased by a club. Yeah, who knows, right? But I think in the case of Sesko and Gyökeres, both of them would quite like to move to Arsenal. Both of them would be welcomed, I think, with open arms by the supporters. And so now with Arsenal doing this, and obviously Gyökeres's want not to join Manchester United has probably come out via the agent, I would imagine, to just keep Arsenal on their toes, to alert them to the fact that he's still there and he's still interested, despite them seemingly pursuing a deal for Benjamin Sesko. So I think this is all really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. The idea of signing both is an idea that's been talked about quite a bit in the live chat, and I've heard many people bring this up to me over the last couple of days and on social media. I wouldn't completely rule it out because you just never know, but I think it's highly unlikely that Arsenal would buy two centre forwards, given that we've still got Kai Havertz. I know that he'd probably play more of a midfield role next season if we bring one of these guys in, but given that he remains at the club, given that we got Gabby Jesus to come back from injury, I'd be very, very surprised if Arsenal were to go out and bring in two centre forwards. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Arsenal are going to try and bring in a centre forward and a winger as well. So, yeah, let's see how this develops. Let's see what happens. I'm certainly not getting massively carried away about what we read yesterday and what came out last night, because, as I say, I think this is probably an agent-driven update, this one. But obviously, if Gyökeres is still an option, that's a good thing. Obviously, Cesco is an option as well. There might be others that we're working on behind the scenes whose names we just haven't got a hold of yet. Who knows? But ultimately, my point here around this is, okay, he doesn't want to join Man United. He preferred to join Arsenal. That's his priority. No shit, Sherlock. Who would rather join Man United than Arsenal right now? The fact that Arsenal are still in there and are still interested is kind of the bit that Fabrizio Romano put out that probably got people excited. But we've heard of interest in a lot of players. How many of those are we going to get in through the door? So stay calm. We'll see what happens. What does this mean for our Cesco interest? I don't think anything at the moment. I think we're interested in both of these players. And I think we're going to keep negotiating, keep discussing, and we're going to try and figure out what is the best option for us as this window goes on and as it develops. Right, I'm going to take a few of your questions before we sign out for today. So if you've got any questions, any thoughts, get them into the live chat box for me. We've got hundreds upon hundreds of you joining us live right now, but we've only got 100 likes on the board. So if you haven't done so already, hit the like button. Doesn't cost a thing. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, and if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, leave us a review. You can also support us on Patreon if you so wish, and we've got a Patreon video coming your way a little bit later on today, so keep your eyes peeled for that. If you're going to sign up, now's a good time. Right, we'll be back in just a moment. When we come back, we're going to take your questions and comments from the live chat. Okay, let's have a look at what some of you guys are saying on this. MJ Marshall says, Harry, he's going to Manchester United. Well, it looks like his agents literally just briefed everybody that he's not. So let's see. He might still end up there. Who knows? If a deal that would bring him to Arsenal was to collapse or whatever, you just never know. MJ Marshall saying, check the news from Portugal. What news is this? Share it with us. Is there an article? Is there a piece? And who's it come from as well? Because there are some really bad sources around all of this as well. So, yeah, let's see. I'm happy to read it out, happy to react to it. Share the link in the chat and I'll pick that up for sure. Ian Wallace says, personally, I'd rather Cesco, but I'm happy with anyone that will help improve us. What else have we got in the chat? Robert says, I don't think Gyökeres would have openly ruled out Manchester United unless he's been given behind the scenes positive actions for the club. Yeah, maybe. Mike Jones says, I prefer Viktor Gyökeres over Cesco. Hope we land him and Rodrigo. Would be an amazing summer. What else have we got? Just rolling through. Robert says on that Rodrigo point that was just raised, if Rodrigo's a no-go, who are we making a number one that is better than what we have? Honestly, that's the big question. There's been a lot of talk about various players. I was talking with a friend who I hadn't seen in a while, but I sort of met up with at the wedding over the weekend, who lives out in Spain, covers Spanish football really, really closely. And we were talking about Nico Williams at length. And he said, look, for that release clause, it's probably worth having a go. He's got the potential. The upside is potentially very, very high. But the wages and the salary was the problem. And I just wonder if that is going to be a stumbling block for Arsenal. And also, I don't like the fact that Nico Williams is said to be, if you read some of the latest reports coming out of Spain, sort of flirting with multiple clubs right now. Barcelona mentioned, Bayern mentioned, and various others. So, yeah, I'm not sure. Apologies. I'm not sure why my microphone did that just there, but hopefully it's all back to normal. Yeah, I'm not sure who I'd like to see coming in the wide positions at the moment. Rodrigo is the one. He's the one that I really, really want. But I also recognize that that's probably a very, very difficult deal to do. So we're going to have to keep our powder dry on that one. I say keep our powder dry. What I actually mean is we're going to just have to stay calm and see what is possible. MJ Marshall says record Portugal. Let's have a look. I asked what he was referencing when he said that there was some news about Gyökeres coming out. Okay, so Record is saying Arsenal have frozen their pursuit of Viktor Gyökeres. They've had enough and feel Sporting's price of 65 million is too high. Okay, but that doesn't mean that the player doesn't want to go to Arsenal and would rather join Man United. But we'll see. We'll see. We're going to get all sorts of different reports coming out, aren't we? We heard that the Gyökeres chat was completely dead and that he was all set for Manchester United. Then we heard his priority is Arsenal and that Arsenal are still assessing their options. This is what I'm saying, man. We all need to stay calm and just wait and see what happens. We can discuss these stories. We can have our opinions, but ultimately there's going to be so many twists and turns. Matthew says, why do you think we're moving slowly compared to others? Is it just the way Berta works? It's very difficult to say, isn't it? Because I think with Berta, it's a new thing for us. I know he's not new to the game. He's obviously been doing great things over the years at Atletico Madrid, but I don't know how he works. I understand why people are a little bit panicked and a little bit worried by how long some of these negotiations are seemingly taking, but we don't know how he works. If he ends up going and landing 2 top signings, let's say for argument's sake, he landed Benjamin Sesko and Rodrigo, I think 90% of the Arsenal fan base would be delighted by that. Now, why rush into the wrong deals? Instead, you should take your time and make sure that you get the right deals. And the other thing is, and I keep saying this, and I will say it until I'm blue in the face, preseason doesn't start until the beginning of July. So whether you sign a player now or you require an extra week to negotiate in order to get the best possible deal, it makes no difference whatsoever because those players are off on their holidays. The only difference it makes is to the fans who are growing anxious and frustrated and nervous. But in terms of the grand scheme of things as a football club, it makes no difference. It makes no difference whether you sign them on the 15th of June or on the 1st of July. Plus, we've heard about so many other clubs wanting to do deals in July for financial reasons. Could be the case for us as well. We don't know. I'm not saying that is definitely the case, but just be open-minded is what I'd say on that. Strife says, Harry, great show as always, but why are you worried about Nico flirting with other clubs? We're flirting with multiple strikers. Double standards? I just want a 10 out of 10 window. LOL. Come on, you Gunners. Again, though, I'll tell you why I'm worried about it with Nico Williams, because the Barcelona thing has been lingering in the background for ages. So the reason I worry about that is because I feel like it's probably a little bit more serious than some of the other reports that we hear. Like, for example, Man United want Gyökeres. Cool. If Man United want Gyökeres, they're going to make every effort to sign him. But if we want Gyökeres and everything works in terms of the price point and all the rest of it, we win that duel. We win that battle. A Spanish international like Nico Williams flirting with Barcelona worries me because there's a good chance that they win that battle. It depends who you're going up against. It depends who you're competing with. And in terms of it being double standards, look, we're only going by silly reports here. Like, I say silly because some of them are silly. Not all of them. There's a lot of really, really good journalists out there that report really, really good stuff and timely stuff and all the rest of it. But there's also a lot of shit. There's a lot of nameless Twitter accounts that for some reason have got people eating out of the palm of their hands when they come out with stuff. So much of it is guesswork, man. Like, it's like me going online now, right, and putting out a post saying Arsenal are in talks with Viktor Gyökeres' camp. I could easily say that. And then if in a week's time we hear that Arsenal have moved forward with this, I'll go, look, I told you a week ago. And then people will lap it up and believe me as if I'm some in the know, really well-connected person. Equally, if I've said that we're in talks with Gyökeres' camp and we don't sign him, you're never going to hold me accountable, because then I will turn around and I'll go, yeah, well, we were in talks, but they never progressed. Look at the reporting that we're getting. So much of the reporting is vague. And when something's very, very vague, for me, as a story, it loses credibility. Because then I'm more inclined to believe that a lot of it is guesswork. That's all I'm saying. Like, I'm not saying that all of them talk nonsense, and I'm not saying that I know any better, but just you need to be a little bit more protective of yourself against these stories and the emotion that these stories drive and the appetite that they then drive to see Arsenal do specific bits of business. Because if that business doesn't come off, then we all end up frustrated, angry, and wound up. And that is at a lot of points, and in a lot of instances, that frustration is built on a report that probably was never that solid in the first place. So it appears that we like Sesko and we like Gyökeres. Let's just see what happens. Let's see what happens with this and how it develops. But wanted to bring you up to speed on what the latest reported yesterday was. Obviously, Record Portugal have come out with something now saying that Arsenal have given up because of the price point. Let's see if in the next few, I don't know, hours, coming days, we get something of similar effect from one of the journalists that we would regard as being a little bit more reliable. I don't know. Ayan Roy says, do you think Arsenal's approach of trying to hold on to both players, Sesko and Gyökeres, is the right approach? Because this might affect relationship with whichever agency doesn't get picked for the future. I don't think you can worry about that, because I think that's just the way that the business and the landscape works. But I think also, man, agents, they're not going to refuse to deal with you moving forward if there's a £10 million agent fee there for them to get, or £5 million one, or whatever it might be. Like, it's all about business, it's all about money, it's all about churning over the cash. And so I don't think that would be an issue personally. No, I'm not worried about that. Okay, look, I'm going to take one more and then I'm going to sign off. Let's take this one from Douglas. Harry, given that most of our key targets are coming from other countries, are we saying the timings to relocate, get family in, schools, etc., are still not significant? Well, no. Obviously, the earlier you do it, the better for everybody, right? The better for everybody. But I don't think Arsenal are going to be willing to pay. Let's talk about Viktor Gyökeres as an example, seeing as he's the theme of today's pod. If Arsenal can get Viktor Gyökeres for 60 million by waiting an extra couple of weeks and applying pressure on Sporting, with Gyökeres doing the same from the other direction, they will rather do that than pay 65 million, but it means that Viktor Gyökeres can put his kids in school earlier. The club can't afford to be worried about the timings of house moves and where your kids go to school. We know that they'll support players coming in from overseas in getting all of that set up, but the club would much rather save money and get the best possible deal than worry about personal issues that Viktor Gyökeres and his family might have in the event that he was to make this move. So I'm not saying they wouldn't support in that sense, and I'm not saying that they wouldn't do their utmost to help, but they're going to prioritize doing the right bit of business for the right amount of money above everything else. And so, yes, those things that you mentioned, Douglas, are probably important to the player and his people and his family, and that might lead to them really getting frustrated with how long this whole thing is taking. But I don't think the club look at it that way when they enter negotiations. You can't afford to, because you'll be walked all over. What are you going to do? You know what? We'll pay that extra 7 or 8 million because then Viktor Gyökeres can move his kids over a couple of weeks earlier. No, that's not how the club will view it, and nor should they view it that way, in my opinion. But it's an interesting point that you raise. I just don't think that that's the way that the club will look at it, and I don't think it's the way they should. Anyway, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. Back to our normal schedule now, 10 a.m. every day here on the Chronicles of a Gooner. So don't forget to make sure you're subscribed if you haven't done so already. Leave us a like on the video. It really does help. Can we get to 250 likes by the time I hit end stream? That would be amazing. If you're listening on audio, leave us a review. And if you're a patron, there's a new piece coming your way a little bit later on today. So stay tuned for that. Thank you all so much for the love and support. As always, I'm going to love you and leave you, and I'll speak to you all soon. Until the next one, take care of yourselves. Goodbye.